Here we are back at America's roller coast, Cedar Point in Sandusky, Ohio. This is the main entrance. You're looking at Gatekeeper in front of you that cruises over the entrance. The day I was there was extremely windy, and because of that, many of the rides were shut down. Cedar Point has some of the largest rides in the world. And it's also one of the largest amusement parks in the world. And by amusement park, I mean a carnival midway kind of park. It's not the typical Disney-style theme park. There's no real theme except for one small area. Instead, it's all about the rides, which surround you everywhere. So in front of us is the security gate. Let's pass on through that. And here's the main entrance. Ticket booths are over on the right. Season pass is over on the left. And ahead of us, you can see masses of steel, some of the largest amusement rides ever built. Cedar Point opened in 1870, so in 2020, there's going to be a big celebration. It's 120th anniversary, one of the oldest amusement parks in the United States. And let's pass through the entrance gates onto the main midway. And the first thing you see is this beautiful 1912 Daniel Mueller carousel that was installed at Cedar Point in 1946. It does have a band organ sitting out there, but unfortunately the band organ really doesn't work. They have a nice imitation of it with speakers placed around it, so it sounds like it's working, but it's unfortunately not operational. This is the main midway that we're on right now, and we're going to make a clockwise trek around the park, going from south to north and then back to the south again. So on the entranceway here, you can see all these beautiful plantings in the middle. Over on the right is Point Plaza, which is one of the bigger gift shops in the park. Cedar Point has some of the nicest park gifts that you can buy at an amusement park. Everything is really well themed. They have models of every single roller coaster that they have here, and also souvenirs of rides that the park has since taken out. This right here is the station for the Sky Ride, and it also has the CP shop underneath it. Over there on the left is the Point Pavilion, and that is if you have an outing. You might have your outing in that pavilion over there. Over on the left is Hugo's. It used to be Midway Market, and in 2019 it was redesigned as an Italian eatery. You can see Toff's Ice Cream Parlor. That's the best ice cream in the park. This giant teal track in front of us is Raptor, which at the time it was built was a record-breaking inverted coaster. In fact, pretty much every ride that Cedar Point puts in attempts to break some sort of record. There's more examples of the beautiful plantings in the park. You can see the Ferris wheel. We'll be seeing that a little later off in the distance. That giant yellow track in the distance is the famous Top Thrill Dragster, the first roller coaster to break the 400-foot barrier. The ride that you can see in the distance going upside down there, that's Valraven, which when it was built was the largest dive coaster ever made. And there are lots of intertwining paths in the park. We're going to pretty much stick to the main path because otherwise this video would take several hours. You could take a right over there and it would take you to the east end of the park. We're going to stick along this west end here. Over on the left is a drink station. There's a little splash park for the kids. And over on the right you can see Kiddie Kingdom, which is a whole area for kids. There are actually 3 separate kiddie lands in this park. There is the passageway underneath Raptor that leads to one of my favorite rides in the park, the Blue Streak, the oldest roller coaster in the park, built in 1964 by the great John Allen. That's also how you would get to Valraven's entrance. The entrance to Raptor is actually just a little ways behind us. Over there on the right is the Coliseum, which has an arcade in the basement. Unfortunately, they took out one of my favorite things in there. They used to have a row of pinball machines, but they got rid of all the pinball machines for this season. And here's another one of my favorite things, cheese on a stick. One of the delicacies that only Cedar Point provides. You can't really find it anywhere else in the entire United States, unfortunately. But Cedar Point has it. And if you've never had it, it's delightful. Clogs those arteries in no time flat. Over here is Cedar Downs, which is one of only 2 of these left in the entire world. It's a racing derby, so it's basically a giant carousel that goes at a very high speed, and the horses are 4 abreast and they race back and forth. Over there on the right you can see the Snoopy Boutique, which has all things peanuts. Cedar Point just re-upped for another 20 years for licensing for peanuts. There's a Subway. And over here on the left are the Cadillac cars, one of 2 antique car rides in the park. This one winds its way under the structure of the Raptor. And you can see over there a Sweet Spot, which has lots of, as you might expect, candy and sweets. And there's one of the nicest gift shops in the park, the Pagoda gift shops. If you like amusement park and roller coaster themed t-shirts, that's the place to go. And now we're coming up on the bulk of the track of Valravn. And over on the right here is another little alleyway that takes you, well, it's not really little, it's huge, but it's an alleyway that takes you down toward the east end of the park and the boardwalk. There's the famous giant water tower over there. You can see a scrambler in the distance. This little stage has 2 shows that go on during the day. And we'll pause here to watch Valravn come down the drop. What's nice about these drop coasters is it holds you there looking straight down vertically before letting you go. Yep, thrills aplenty. Here's the other Skyride station. This is where you would get off of the ride if you were boarding at the other end. You can board at either end. It's a great way to get from one end to the other because it's a pretty long walk. The spiral track in front of us is the track of the Corkscrew, the first roller coaster to have 3 loops. And you can see Coaster's Diner in front of us that serves hamburgers and hot dogs and shakes. Power Tower is 300 feet high. It's a 4 abreast drop tower. So we're going to bear to the left up here. The midway forks at this point, and you can go either left or right. We're going to stay to the left, to the west end of the park, and make our way around. And I wanted to do a video in 2019 because the park added a rather extensive new section for this year. So I figured it would be a nice thing to walk through it. And as usual, from time to time, you'll hear this ominous sounding backwards music, and that's because I'm avoiding the copyright police. Because all through the park, they have pop music blasting all day long. And over here on the right, this big blue stage is Vertical Impact, which is a little hard to describe. It's a sort of a high-energy dance, gymnastics, stunt bike show. And over here on the left is a giant area of nothing. This is where the Wildcat roller coaster used to be at one time. And they had stands originally set up there for a light show, and the stands are gone, and they haven't yet replaced it. Now over here on the right in front of us is the Iron Dragon Station, another one of my favorite rides in the park. It's much maligned. People call it Dragon Iron, but I really enjoy that feeling of swinging back and forth as you go through the course. The loop in front of us is for Rougarou, which is the redo of Mantis, which at the time it was built was the largest stand-up roller coaster in the world. And it had so much G-forces to it that when I rode it, my knees buckled. I couldn't stand up. And thus they used to have a phrase for Mantis saying, "Can you stand it? Ha ha ha." But Rougarou is now a sit-down coaster, so it's a little easier to take. It's still a pretty intense ride. And because of the box structure of the Bolliger and Mabillard track, it emits an enormous roar whenever the train goes through its course. Toward our left is the station for the Cedar Point and Lake Erie Railroad, the South Station. The train would head north from here on the west end along the lake, and then it gets to the South Station, which we'll see a little later on, and from there it heads back, and in the leg coming back, you go through Bonetown, which has a lot of fun animatronic skeletons. That giant blue hill in front of us is Millennium Force. Millennium Force was the first roller coaster to break the 300-foot barrier. The ride is 95 miles an hour. It's one of the best rides in the park, always highly rated. And the entrance was just next to that big sign there. Now we're heading into the Frontier Trail area, which is the shadiest area of the park, and it's one of the few themed areas at Cedar Point. It's themed to a sort of Ohio settlement at first, and then it turns into a sort of Old West town. Over on the left where those umbrellas are is a panda restaurant, if you're in the mood for Chinese food. There goes Millennium Force. Over on the right is the photo shop and also the Red Garter Saloon, which is not only an eatery, but it also has shows there during the day. Cedar Point currently has 17 roller coasters in the park, which is tied for the most roller coasters currently. And there are rumors that for 2020 they're getting another coaster, so they'll be up to 18. But they also have the most rides, period. 72 rides in the entire park. There's an Auntie Annie's pretzel stand. Auntie Annie seems to have invaded a lot of parks. They are good pretzels. And there's another one of those drink stations where you can mix your own Coke drinks. And the ubiquitous Dippin' Dots, which of course shouldn't be there because it is the ice cream of the future, so it hasn't arrived yet. And here's good old Albert, one of the old steam engines that they keep on display here. And this little tunnel up here marks the formal entrance into the Frontier Town section. As you can see, it's already feeling a lot different than the main midway of Cedar Point, which is fairly open. This has a lot more shade. It's more like walking through a city park. Nice on a hot day. The song in the background that's playing backwards was a country western version of AC/DC's Dirty Deeds, which I thought was a bit amusing. So over here on the right, there's an area for pony rides for kids. There's an outhouse, if you really have to go. And there are lots of really quaint shops and crafters that are along this trail. There's the old fort in front of us. And over here we have some stocks in case you'd like to take time to shame your family. All the buildings that you're looking at were saved from other various locations and moved to Cedar Point and reassembled and rehabilitated. And there is Frontier Fling, which is the park's sky coaster. That's where you get hauled up on a cord and then you pull the ripcord and you go flying down. But more importantly, this is also the new section that I wanted to show you called Forbidden Frontier. And it's an interesting addition for Cedar Point. They've never done anything like this that I know of. This is the area that was once occupied by Dinosaurs Alive, which was their upcharge dinosaur exhibit that they had. And it also was home. This was the entrance where you would go to Shoot the Rapids, which was a short-lived water ride that they had for a few years. So if you cross through here by the railroad tracks, you'll enter this long series of winding paths, and as you're going to see, it's really up to you what you want to do in this place. So this right here is the entrance if you want to go on the sky coaster. You sort of go through that gate, and that's where you do that. But to get into the Forbidden Frontier, you follow this path here. And that giant iron tower over on the left that you saw, that's Snake River Falls, the big tower for it, which is the park Shoot the Chute ride, which we'll see a little bit later on. So this station here in front of us used to be the station for Shoot the Rapids. And it really has just been repurposed as the entrance area for the Forbidden Frontier. The big blue track in front of us is Millennium Force, which completely surrounds this area. I think that's the favorite thing of mine about this area, is you are completely surrounded by Millennium Force. You can get really up close and personal with that ride. This little sort of river area used to have a boat ride where they would have humorous scenes and you'd have a captain of the ship who would tell bad jokes. It was a fun family ride. So there's Snake River Swamp. Snake River Swamp has these sort of huckleberry fin rafts that you can power yourself by just pulling on a rope. It looks like they're structured to have races, but I didn't see that happening when I was there. So we're going to follow this little path here. Now, as you can see, everything's soaked here. There are these detonators, and there's one in front of us. And what you can do is you can pump that, and it will set off an explosive charge of water that completely soaks the area. So if you're feeling really hot in the Sandusky summers, you can come here to cool off. As you can see, there's the track of Millennium Force. So it's some really nice landscaping throughout here. But there really isn't a lot to do per se. You basically just relax following these paths. You'll see there are areas where you can just sit down and relax in the shade. Also, you notice Truce Day. Well, every day is Truce Day in Forbidden Frontier. But they do have stuff that happens. As you'll see, there are performers. There are little stages that are set up. There are little shops that are set up. There's another view of how close you can get to Millennium Force. And there goes Top Thrill Dragster, which we'll see closer a little bit later. And there's one of the little shops, along with another stock if your family's getting unruly. And a jail. And you'll notice that there are all sorts of little intersecting paths all over. I'm going to go to the right here because I want to show you this. It's a massive playscape for kids with rope bridges and all sorts of slides and stuff that they can do. So kids could occupy themselves here for hours. And there are nice seats around in the shade where grown-ups can watch the kids. So let's go back down this path over here. Here's one of those little stages I was talking about. But basically, the area, what it's supposed to be is a sort of exploratory area where guests become part of this really detailed backstory that the park has developed. The park's website says, as the day unfolds, you'll have an opportunity to play a role as big or as little as you want in this immersive living story with the power to sway the outcome and the fate of Adventure Island depending on the choices you make. From mind-bending challenges and group competitions to secret missions and simple conversation starting, which I didn't engage in, you'll have to figure out who to side with and who to trust, or simply sit back, grab some provisions, and watch the action unfold. So you can get really involved or you can be a spectator. So it's a really interesting idea, but it wasn't really clear how you do any of those things. I guess you strike up a conversation with people and that gets you involved. Since there's a truce every single day, I assume not much happens until you make it happen. And there are some things you can buy over there. And as you can see, this area alone is the size of many other amusement parks. This is a really sizable place. And to devote this much area to that type of guest experience, I think was very courageous on the park's part. And I'm really interested to see how this plays out and how it develops. And now you can see we've come around to another angle on that playscape. Yeah, I love watching that train go around. And provisions, as you might expect, is an eatery, thus all the cafe tables. And that's about it for Forbidden Frontier. This leads you back to the main entrance. Again, nice shot there of the Millennium Force track. On the left is part of the trough for the Shoot the Rapids ride. And there you can see a couple pulling themselves along on the raft. There's a nice view of the back of Snake River Falls. And that does it for Forbidden Frontier. There's Skyhawk off in the distance. So now we'll continue with our clockwise swoop through Frontier Town. Off to the left there is Delbert, who is from Paddle Wheel Excursions, the boat ride that the park used to have. So we'll continue on, heading north along this path in the Frontier Trail. Over here on the left is Barnyard, which is a petting zoo. And straight ahead there, if we keep walking down just on the left, is probably the wettest ride in the park. It's Thunder Canyon, which is their river raft ride, and you will get completely drenched on that ride. Now I want to take a little detour here through the Addington Mill. I've never gone in here before with the camera, and I just wanted to show you what's in here. It's basically a demonstration of how grain is milled.
Millers set the millstones at various distances apart, depending on what grain of finished flour or meal was requested. If the stones were set too close together, the finished meal was too powdery. If the grooves in the stones were worn, the meal was coarse and irregular.
And there you have it. And we pop out on the other side. These people here just came off Snake River Falls. Over on the left is a glass blowing demonstration and a shop with a lot of really nice glass souvenirs in it. There goes Snake River Falls. And this red track in front of us is Maverick, which is a really intense roller coaster. It's not very high, it's pretty fast, and it's incredibly twisted. I like the water cannons there. Let's pause here for a second and take a look at Snake River Falls coming down so you can see how drenching the ride is. And if you look closely, you can also see somebody way in the distance on the Sky Coaster about ready to go down. That's refreshing. Snake River Falls was the largest shoot-the-chutes ride ever built when it was installed. But imagine that splash happening to you over and over again, and that's Thunder Canyon. So now we're coming up to the far north end of the park. Now there are a couple ways we could go. We could take a right here, which would bring us to the Cedar Creek Mine ride. And there's also the Cedar Point Museum is over there, which is a nice air-conditioned building that has a lot of interesting displays. We're going to go this way. The big round building you see in front is basically used as storage for the park. There's a Chick-fil-A. And there's the park's second antique car ride down this end. The building in front of us used to be the station for Whitewater Landing, which was a phenomenal flume ride they had, a double flume ride. And it's now the station for Maverick. And we'll see the entrance queue as we get around the corner here. There's the queue line. And as you can see, it's a bit of a wait. Cedar Point is really good at managing crowds. And it looks like a pretty busy place today, but the parking lot was only half full when I was there. You'll normally get between 30 and 50,000 people in this park each day, so it's a really busy place. So they have to handle queues well. One thing nice about this queue is it does have misters scattered throughout to keep you cool. There's the brake run for Maverick. Now this enormous hill in front of us is the lift hill for Steel Vengeance, which in my opinion is the best ride in the park right now. Unfortunately, it was down the day we were there. You can see that crane with a crew on it working on the lift hill. So I didn't get to ride it the day I was there, but it is an amazing makeover of the old Mean Streak, which we used to begrudgingly call Mean Squeak. It was an old wood coaster that was, at the time, the biggest wood coaster ever built, but it was a bit of a maintenance problem. And this was reconverted last season by RMC into Steel Vengeance, and it's phenomenal. Oh, and if you look close, we just walked by, back there on the right, another cheese on a stick stand. This is the northernmost cheese on a stick. If you walk over this way, this would normally be the path that takes you to the queue line for Steel Vengeance. But as you can see, it was blocked off, and it just was a dead end over here. But that gives you a look at the ride. If you haven't seen it before, look at that track. It is amazingly twisted. A lot of fun. So let's double back and head through the rest of Frontier Town. Smokehouse on the left, as you might expect, has barbecue. And there's a first aid station over there, and also an ice cream station. And those two, I think, are about the same. There's an arcade over on the left, another eatery. There's the antique car ride. The yellow track in front of us is the one hill of Top Thrill Dragster, the first roller coaster to break the 400-foot barrier. The shorter track, the darker track in front of us, is one of the lifts for the Cedar Creek Mine Ride, which is a nice sort of junior coaster. At the time it was built, it was the largest mine ride ever constructed. As you see, Cedar Point likes record breakers. Every ride they built at some point was a record breaker. So we could go to the right here. There's the entrance to the Cedar Creek Mine Ride. The town hall, the museum is down there, and also the entrance to Skyhawk, which is the park's huge screaming swing ride. But we're going to keep going this way. And we're heading east at the north end of the park. And this path will take us to the next sort of midway area of the park. It's called the Gemini Midway. And it's basically just like an old-style carnival midway, like most of the park is, sort of like the main midway. And the big ride there is, as you can see in front of us, Gemini, which at the time it was built, yes, was the largest roller coaster ever built. It's a racing coaster made by Aerodynamics. It's a steel coaster with a wood structure, and it's a lot of fun. That's the slingshot in front of us there, which is an upcharge. There's a brief look at Boneville down there. So now we're heading east on the Gemini Midway. And that massive balloon of Snoopy, that's a bounce castle. And that's also the signal that right there is Camp Snoopy, which is another children's play area. It's pretty extensive, very nicely themed. There's the entrance to Gemini with its gorgeous retro station. And this building in front of us now is one of my favorite stops, the Happy Friar, which features, guess what? Cheese on a stick. And just in case there is any doubt, yes, I like cheese on a stick. And there's one of the entrances to Camp Snoopy. And that massive skateboard-like ride is Pipe Scream. And there goes Gemini. It used to have the highest capacity of any ride in the world. They would run 6 trains on this. They're down to 4 trains now. The yellow and blue ride in front of us is the Lake Erie Eagles. It's a flying scooter. And then beyond that, you can see the Monster, which is a spider ride. So a lot of standard rides here that you would find on most midways around the country. I love how colorful everything is.
Yeah, they don't got a
There is one ride here that was just removed, however, and a lot of people were sad to see it go. It was called the Witch's Wheel, a pretty stock carnival ride, but it was replaced by what you see here on the left. It's sort of awkward name, the Backbeat Queue, which is a very large barbecue restaurant. There's a nice shot of how massive that structure of Top Thrill Dragster is. But yeah, there it is, Backbeat Queue. And there's plenty of room to eat there. It serves a lot of people. Not a bad thing to have a lot of good eateries in a park. And I like the way they did the patio lights.
Okay. But once you're my age, it won't really matter. Okay. So.
So now we're reaching the park's far east end, and that in front of us is the station for Magnum XL200, which was the first roller coaster to break the 200-foot barrier. Still a really potent ride, very popular. That, underneath the track of the ride, is also an exit out to the resorts. So if you're staying at Lighthouse Point or one of the other Cedar Point resorts, that's a way to get into the park. That also takes you to the water park area and to the really nice boardwalk area alongside the beach. Over on the left is the entrance to Magnum. And you can just see off in the distance there Rougarou going off the lift. On the right is the outward bound track for Top Thrill Dragster. We did see it running earlier, but the winds must have took their toll because it hasn't run in a while now. And notice they give you plenty of places to sit and rest. You do a lot of walking in this park, but thankfully, unlike other parks like Dorney or Busch Gardens, there really aren't any hills in the park, so it's pretty much all level. Now over here on the left is the Breakers, which is the park's resort hotel complex. It underwent a $70 million restoration a few years ago, and it looks really sharp. Now coming up in front of us is the station for Corkscrew. That was the one we saw at the beginning of the video with the helical track, the first roller coaster to have 3 inversions. The lift hill for Corkscrew is over on the left. The installation of the Corkscrew really set the sort of design ethos of the park from then on. It was made to really awe people when they were in the park. You walk underneath that helix and the ride completely surrounds you. And so that's what they've done with almost all the rides in the park. They keep them really up front, and what it says is this park is all about the rides. Even though the Corkscrew no longer is a big record holder, that helix is still pretty awe-inspiring when you walk under it as the ride's going by. And in front of us now on the right is the station for Top Thrill Dragster. Just slightly behind us is a grandstand. Talk about having rides surrounding people. They actually put a grandstand in there just for people to sit and watch the ride run. So there are the trains sitting in the station, as you can see. And there are people there, so maybe it'll run a little later on. And there goes the power tower from 300 feet, dropping people into oblivion. It's another good shop on the left for getting some roller coaster t-shirts and hats and other apparel. The knot of track in front of us, the red and orange track, that's Iron Dragon, the final double helix for the ride. And there's the helix of the corkscrew in front of us. I really like the setting of Iron Dragon here at the end, sitting on top of the lake with a little water feature at the end. Up here on the left is one of two fresh squeezed lemonade stands in the park. It's really good. The other one is basically on the opposite side of the midway. See what I mean? It's still a spectacular sight. So this brings us back onto the main midway again. There's the North Skyride Station. And what we're going to do from here is we're going to stay to the left, to the east. There's the Matterhorn, another popular carnival ride. There's a scrambler. And we're going to go toward the far east end of the park near the boardwalk, because there's another section of midway there. We'll be going down that little stretch of midway that I mentioned near the beginning of the video. That's actually pretty wide. In front of us now you can see the Snoopy sign. That's the other Peanuts themed kiddie area that's in the park. This is a little smaller than Camp Snoopy, but it's got a lot of stuff for the kids to do. We're going to actually sort of snake through that area. Over on the left, the white building is park offices, and just down this walkway on the left is Melt, which is a place that serves grilled cheese. In front of us there is Windseeker. I still get ribbed for my first Cedar Point video calling it Windjammer, but what the heck. There's Windthrobber over there, and this is the nice Snoopy area here with the waterfall, little tunnel. Kids could spend an enormous amount of time just in this one area of the park. And there's a little peanut show going on that happens all during the day. For some reason, they were doing music from The Lion King. Don't know why. So we'll cut through this area up here on the right, heading toward that giant Ferris wheel. The big building in front of us is the back of the Coliseum. So this brings us out onto another area of Midway. There's the stage setting for the Cedar Point Knights. That yellow and teal track that you see in front of us is Wicked Twister, which is a sort of shuttle that goes back and forth. Again, that was the largest of its kind when it was built. The Ferris wheel, as you might expect, gives you really spectacular views of the park and of Lake Erie. There's the park's huge Dodgem Arena, and now you can see we're at the back of the Kitty Kingdom that we saw at the beginning of the video. This orange and blue structure here is Max Air, which you'll see in action in a minute. And the blue track in front of us is Gatekeeper, which, when it was built, was the largest wing coaster ever built, where you hang off the sides of the track. That's the coaster that goes right over the entrance of the park. There goes Wicked Twister. And there goes Max Air. That doesn't look like it's spinning very fast, but because of the enormous size of that ride, it packs a punch. You do get a lot of airtime on it, but you also get your brain scrambled. And there's the entrance to Gatekeeper. And some little eateries up there on the left. And now we have a row of games on the left, and then Kitty Kingdom is all on the right. Kitty Kingdom is also home to the second classic carousel that Cedar Point has, a Denzel carousel that has menagerie animals on it, including ostriches. Cedar Point used to have a third classic carousel, and that was sent off to one of the other Cedar Fair parks. And since we're right next to Johnny Rockets, they usually have a 50s themed show going on here at various times of the day. And this is one of them, the Beach Crew.
Speaking of which, Jay, what did you think when you said that you loved me?
And more games over here. I won Karen a ukulele in one of those booths one time. And there's the entrance to Raptor. And with that, we're back at the main Midway, heading toward the entrance. So, not bad for a 120-year-old park. Cedar Point is constantly keeping things fresh. It's retained some of its traditional rides, but at the same time, it has no qualms about throwing stuff out and bringing in newer and better. And it's made some controversial changes doing that, but it's generally been successful. It's still one of the most heavily attended parks in the United States, if not the world. And there's a little something for everyone in the park. So there are lots, of course, thrill rides for those thrill seekers. There are more milder rides for families and for older people, and there are lots of kiddie rides for the younger set. So by offering such a wide variety of attractions, Cedar Point has kept itself relevant while continuing to expand. It's certainly worth a multi-day visit. There's probably no way you would get through this entire park in one day. I mean, I can walk through it in 1 hour, but that's not riding anything. And be prepared on busy days to wait quite a while before you get on rides. Sandusky is located between Cleveland and Toledo, smack in the middle of the state, up on the spit into Lake Erie. So if you're in that area, this is a place you really need to come. Cedar Point is unique in the United States and really earns its title of Thrill Capital of America.